welcome to the 12 o'clock news. This week, joining myself and Sideshow is Harsha, and we're going to be talking to you a little bit about all the roster changes that have been happening this week. But first, we want to look at the world rankings. Josh, you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on there?
Yeah, so Over.gg posts world rankings roughly every month. It's myself, Admirable, and Harsha are the secret panel that work on them, using the evidence of games that people have played along with our own intuition about which teams have looked better in play, because obviously there are very few games that are actually still played in competitive Overwatch, relatively compared with Esports. Lunatic High, top in the table. Essentially, it's the top 6 Korean teams in the top 6, and Runaway have made a real break for the top after beating Kongdu and Sierra, and then they beat Lunatic High just after these were posted as well, which is another huge boost for that team. And Envious Misfits, Cloud9 making an appearance as well, who've just actually picked up a Korean as their coach, Bishop, who is a super interesting guy. I've got an interview of there with him as well. So it's very much a story of some developing potential Western teams that could challenge the Korean teams, but we're starting to get to the point where it's looking dangerous for Western teams if they step off the gas, because these Koreans are looking so coordinated and incredibly talented at the moment, Harsha.
Absolutely, and I think it's pretty funny because near the beginning of Overwatch, everybody's talking about, oh, the Koreans are never going to be as good as we are at FPSs. And
not that fast.
Yeah, now all of a sudden they're just wrecking everybody, so I think it's pretty funny.
Yeah, they're insanely talented, and the way that they're developing teams all the time as well, and they have such separate styles. I think one of the really interesting differences between the scenes as well is that in North America and in Europe, you'll have a top team that sets a dominant composition, and all the other teams like, whoa, that is working so well, let's do that, or let's try and imitate that, let's use our own strengths to try and put our own slight twist on it. Korea's nothing like that. They seem to work much more off their own understanding of the game, but also the little pieces that they have within the team. So you've got Meta Athena, who play a completely unique style. Nobody else plays like them. You've got Runaway, they play a unique blend of the dive strategy with Stitch on like counter hit scan DPSs most of the time, of like taking out the opponent's DPS. You've got Lunatic High, super dive team, Congo Panthera, super tanky team. It's awesome to watch as well.
I think one of the cool things that Korea has done is they've like always just played, regardless of what is like deemed to be strong, even like when you're just taking into account the math, they've always just played what they like felt like was best, right? And you mentioned it, and one of the cool things is dive has always been viable in Korea. We saw it like at IEM, we saw it obviously throughout all of Apex this season and last season. So I think they've kind of just been confident with what they're playing.
Yeah, definitely. They're the best region at making dive compositions work, and dive compositions rely so much on the coordination between your team and being able to give people the right resources to be able to deliver. So that's certainly going to be interesting to see how that one progresses, and to see how the rest of Apex progresses, because it's essentially the almost the World Championships from here on out at the moment.
Absolutely. I do have to say, I remember everybody was talking about, just wait until KESPA gets involved. Obviously, that's the Korean Esports organization. I don't know the actual acronym, what it stands for, right? But, Korea's going to look very scary once teams like SK Telecom, KT Rolster, like CJ Entis, once all of these teams, like organizations come in and build their own Korean superstar teams, essentially.
All right, well, let's take a look at the transfers that have happened this week in Overwatch here. It looks like all of Hammer's Esports have been purchased by Luminosity Gaming Evil, and we'll be talking to Avast later on in the show about that trade. Grand Danois to Team Singularity, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Team Singularity have come in, and they are a Danish organization. They were founded sometime in about August 2016 or April 2016. I can't quite remember, but very young organization anyway. And they have signed the 2 top Danish teams. Now, these aren't top teams, although Grand Danois, which are now Team Singularity Ninjas, have the potential to become like on the lower end of a tier 1 European team, potentially. We'll see. But it's a great thing for Europe that they've signed both teams. They're going to be sister teams in that kind of sense. Team Singularity, Ninjas, and Gorillas, and they'll be playing against each other. It's just great to see organizations actually investing in Europe, like no matter the size.
So really quickly, can we talk about how they picked Gorillas and Ninjas as the names?
I know, it's just been a week of strange names, hasn't it? There's been Ninjas,
Indeed.
Gorillas, Loyal, Evil. I mean, whenever I hear Loyal, I just think of DJ Khaled.
I like Evil a lot. Like I just think that's the coolest name, honestly. I would take that over Gorillas any day. I feel like
You know why they're
makes
called...
me think of guerrilla warfare.
You know why they're called Evil as well, right? It's because they're the NA roster. The Loyal ones are the Europeans. It's like, this is just how it goes in Overwatch, apparently. So yeah, it's been interesting to see that roster move as well, with Hammers picking up that team. And of course, Hammers have picked up the Chavs as well. They got rid of. The team left Hammers to pursue bigger and better things with Luminosity, presumably for some kind of buyout fee or whatever was in their contract. And then they've gone on to pick up the Chavs, which I think is a great acquisition because they are the best unsigned team at the moment in all of Overwatch, probably, unless there's probably some really good unsigned teams in Korea actually, but
Yeah.
In terms of the West, definitely.
Yeah, you
Yeah, in terms of the West.
writing
Oh, yeah,
about
go
them
ahead.
for a long time. I got interested in the Chavs because Josh has been writing about them so much, and I think that's really like you get a lot of promotion when people start noticing like how good you are and you get that good press. So I'm sure that helped. Let's see here. You want to talk about Team of Snow? I'm actually really curious about this because you did an in-depth interview with Man of Snow about what happened with Renegades and what he wants to do going forward. So I wonder if you have any insight to give us on what you think's going on with Team of Snow.
Yeah, the idea that Man of Snow has come up with is to take 6 amateur players and work on his coaching skills to try and develop them into a semi-pro team to the point where they can get an organization. It's an incredibly ambitious aim, in my opinion. It's going to be good for him developing his own coaching skills, but I think for me personally, I think the time has passed to the point where you can actually do that in Overwatch. You need to be able to gather players and test them and bring in new players and new talent. And it's got to the point, I think, where the competition is sufficiently good that you actually need to go to how other esports do it, where you're slowly working your way up the ranks and bringing in better and better talents and trying to craft a roster that improves over time rather than just grabbing a bunch of players together and seeing if you can push them up the ranks. I don't think it's going to actually end anywhere for the players. For him, probably develop some coaching talent.
Yeah, certainly a noble initiative, but I can't really see a world where this becomes like I mean, maybe they end up with like a smaller tier sponsor, but I certainly don't think they're going to be. This is going to be like a full-time thing. I think, and maybe what happens is some of the like very good players on this roster get noticed because of kind of the initiative. They're going to be probably playing in like some amateur tournaments. So. I mean, I definitely think it's a bigger boon to Man of Snow's coaching career.
Interesting. Well, I'll be following that closely because I'm really curious to see how that ends up. So we talked about Hammers and the Chavs. You want to talk a little bit about Shatter 2K going to Team Liquid?
Yeah, Harsha can give you his opinions on that because he was covering that story and we're talking about Louis, the guy that they were previously using in the Carbon series.
Yeah, so I think Shatter 2K has always been like very well known for his Genji, being like the kind of Genji prodigy. I think Liquid saw an opportunity to sign him. He's like a young talent. It makes sense for them to want him. And actually, I think they've been performing fairly well with him within the Carbon series. They haven't really been winning, but Liquid isn't really known to be a winning team. Certainly taking maps off of like the upper tier NA teams though is pretty cool. And I think they'll definitely try and improve and kind of build around Shatter as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, they are currently sat at the bottom of Carbon series, but that's not like Shadow 2K's put them at the bottom.
Yeah.
They were already a team that you would expect to be at the bottom of the Carbon series. It's got some reasonable teams in there. The new LG Evil team are actually at the top. 6-0, unbeaten at the moment. Immortal's slipping quite a bit as well, which I think is quite interesting because they just came off the win at the Winter Premier, and now it's the same kind of teams, but with Hammers in there as well. So you're seeing this this infighting within the tier 2 North American teams that is going to be super interesting when the teams that were competing in Korea come back, like Cloud9, who have recently looked so much more improved with their new coach Bishop. Envious coming back, who've been in a slump but still should be good enough to crush most of these guys. And Rogue, of course, who've just come over from Europe instead, who are going to be smashing faces as well. Notice that I forgot about Fnatic because their performance was forgettable.
Triggered some people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was actually going to say, you can see some of these guys playing in the Esports Arena 1v1s coming up next week. We are going to have a lot of those guys from C9 and Rogue and FaZe and a lot of these guys duking it out 1v1. So I'm actually really interested to see how that kind of shakes out, because you don't really get the opportunity to see that. I mean, every once in a while they'll stream 1v1s and you'll see some pro 1v1s and it'll be like for jokes and funny and stuff like that. But some of these guys are really practicing for it. I'm really interested to see what comes out of it at the end of the day, because the names on the list right now for who's competing in it are pretty impressive. I think Too Easy, Tailspin, some of the teams I mentioned earlier. It's just going to be really really interesting. Especially since they just came back from Korea, so they're probably, or at least the C9 guys, they're probably ready for some easy mode.
Ready to style on some. I don't know. It's gonna be cool though too, in a sense, to see. Like, there's a bit of ego attached to this. They're pro players, you know. They don't want to get beaten in 1v1s. It's the only mode where they can control 100% of what actually happens to like their team. It's such a team-based game when you play it properly and competitive that I think there's going to be some smack talk about who wins or who loses. It is genuinely going to be quite a lot of fun, I think.
You never know when another one of these comes up, so you might not be able to redeem yourself for quite a while.
Yeah, you might just be the 1v1 champion forever. Like, be able to stake your claim as the single best player in Overwatch.
God, that's actually honestly because there's the open signups take up to like 512 people, so you can genuinely say like, I beat, everyone.
511 people. That's what you can genuinely say.
All right,
basically the whole of Overwatch.
Basically everybody ever. I think that was it for the news portion. I think there's some stuff that we wanted to discuss with Harsha, just regarding some of the updates that have happened recently. If you would like to take it away, Harsha.
Yeah, sure. So certainly one of the bigger stories to come out of the last week or two is the kind of the Sports Business Journal's estimates for Overwatch League buy-in figures for kind of the bids. They're valuing teams or spots at 2 to 5 million generally, and they say triple that for the bigger markets like Los Angeles, presumably like New York, maybe like Chicago or something like that. So I think this isn't really new news, so to speak. Kind of we've kind of known a lot of these figures since even November. I think people were talking, like sports management was talking to people within the scene, but now that it's kind of public and people are kind of freaking out about this, 15 million is a lot of money.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of teams or a lot of orgs being able to just come up with that out of nowhere.
It's not going to be out of nowhere as well, right? Because these organizations have been partnered with the sports franchises for almost this exact purpose, for the betterment of their organizations, but to give them this liquid kind of assets and also the infrastructure capabilities to be able to help their teams and to be able to invest in leagues like this. But at the end of the day, people use this term like it's just a drop in the bucket for a sports team. The reason why these sports teams are successfully run is because they don't just piss away $10 million left, right, and center. So it has to be reasonable. So what I found really interesting was Richard Lewis's tweets on this, because he was actually the first person, as far as I know, to report on the valuations way back when. I think that was what you were talking about in October. He had a video where he stated this $10 million valuation for one of the higher spots. Now it looks like that might be Los Angeles, given this newest report. And he said, the quote, "Actually, a lot of sports organizations find that LA evaluation to be especially laughable and a big turnoff," which is really interesting to me, because the way that a lot of people are assuming it works is that there is so much competition to bid for these spots that it is raising the price to this level. But that kind of suggests that this is what they valued it as. This is like what they expect it to be worth. And a lot of the people involved are like, are you sure? Are you really sure it's going to be worth that? But the thing to keep in mind there as well is that that particular quote is only about the $10 million Los Angeles evaluation. It's not about a general spot being $2 million. It's not like he said that he's had it reported that sports investors are laughing at each individual spot. It might just be that they think that particular one is too overrated for the specific location, and they would rather invest elsewhere.
And if I'm being honest, I know like spots in like League of Legends League have gone for 2 million historically, and so 2 million doesn't seem like it doesn't seem bad at all when you're talking about a franchise league. So there's no relegation for one.
Absolutely.
And then I think presumably there's going to be some revenue sharing, maybe like in the form of sprays or something like that, broadcast revenue. 2 million definitely doesn't seem like an unreasonable figure if we're talking about that, but certainly the 10 to 15 million figures that were floating around as well does seem like a bit of a high valuation. Obviously these are unofficial, so we don't really know, but we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. I think the difference in comparing those two as well is that Overwatch is definitely presenting a model that, while it could work far better, has a lot more risk associated with it than Absolutely. The league spots, because Riot's proven their model works. Well, I mean, works in a sense. We've heard a lot of organizations are actually having a lot of trouble generating money from the spots that they have. So, there's definitely potential to go and look at what CSGO and Dota 2 are doing so well with how they're splitting the revenue from actual products and stickers within the games, and how orgs are making money from that, and therefore they want to invest in those games. So Blizzard can really take a lot from that and take a lot from the Riot model and try and find a good middle ground. It's certainly possible for them to do it. Whether or not you think they will essentially comes down to like a matter of faith or a matter of looking at their track record or whatever. So it's going to be interesting times ahead. So this is shining a little more light, just like lighting a candle about 5 miles away from where the actual stuff is taking place, and going, yeah, I think I can see like a little bit more about what's happening over there. I've heard there's glimmers of some information, but
when it comes to monetization, I tend to trust Blizzard after seeing what happened with Hearthstone, and World of Warcraft. Like, they're so good at making money off video games. They're just so good at it, and it's hard not to think that with all the hype and player base that they've built so quickly with Overwatch, they'd be able to monetize it effectively, or at least build a method through which those organizations can monetize. It feels like with a lot of these sprays and crates and random stuff that they've been doing, that like maybe that's kind of what they're preparing for, is they're testing out different things to kind of see like what people will buy into, so that when they go full force into esports teams, they'll have those products ready to go, and they'll already know what the demand is going to be for it and what the price of it should be and all that sort of thing. Like, so it's kind of because a lot of the sprays and skins and stuff is just like, who really is going to spend actual real money on them, so maybe it's all just part of that development.
You'd be surprised. People like to spend money on, e-things. But yeah, I guess we'll see when the time comes. I have heard, rumors about things coming in like the next several months. I think 2 months was the figure a month ago. So I think we were supposed to be getting significant details by the end of March, but that's just hearsay right now. And okay, I guess the other topic I wanted to talk about is now Blizzard is releasing a new hero after about 2 weeks of speculation. We have Orisa, not Doomfist.
I want Terry Crews.
No Terry Crews.
I want fucking Terry Crews.
What were your thoughts on the hero, Sasha?
My thoughts were, initially it would be really awesome to have a good anchor tank, as Blizzard call it within the game, which is a bit of a buzzword because they've been throwing it around so much, but essentially it's just a tank that plays in the middle of your team that other people can play more slowly around, because if you're not playing with a Reinhardt, everybody has to set up positions where they've got all of the mobility and they're able to evade damage, because they can't just tank it, there's not a shield in front of them. So if you had somebody that was a suitable replacement in those kind of choke point situations, or as a payload's moving forward, then that would be a great asset, because it gives you another option rather than just always having to default to Reinhardt. But having looked at the hero, gotta confess I haven't like watched many games of like scrims or whatever happening in the PTR. I don't even know whether they're happening. But having looked at the hero and dabbled with it a little bit, I don't think this is going to be a replacement for Reinhardt. The DPS is actually really high. Got lots of like utility with what she can do in terms of the halt and the fortify and ultimate as well. So she kind of seems like just another really interesting off tank. But although that's awesome, it's completely missed the mark of what they were intending for it.
Yeah, and I do think that this is kind of the problem that Blizzard's going to face, right? They can't half-ass it, kind of. You have to either introduce like another full just shield tank, or it's just not going to be a replacement for Reinhardt, right? Because we've seen with her, she has like the stationary shield, which I mean, definitely a very useful ability, but I think it's more or less for protecting high ground rather than for using on like payload maps. You can't really advance behind it. It's not something you can really use to push ahead with like the offense, right? And so it just feels like another off tank who can be used in conjugation with Reinhardt, but not a Reinhardt replacement.
She seems to have a lot of extra little things too, the damage boost and the little spider web thing, and it just seems like trying really hard for all these little subtle abilities. Whereas like it felt like that with Anna, but at the same time, all of Anna's abilities had like a unifying kind of concept, and so it made sense to have all these little subtle things that she could do. Because with the rest of like, I don't personally, I mean, obviously I'm quite low level, but I don't see how these things relate to each other. I don't see how the damage boost relates to the ability for her to, you know, live through movement damage, through the spiderweb. Like all these things just seem so disjointed and unrelated that it's hard for me to find like a personality or like a situation where you'd want to put her in, because everything is so differently situational.
Yeah, thematically, I do find it kind of weird because she has like the mini graviton surge. She has like the mini nano boost, or I don't know, maybe nano boost on steroids is what some people were calling it. But like, it's all these kind of abilities from separate heroes that are kind of thrown together in like one concept. That being said, I think she's like a pretty fun hero to play, but like certainly not really what I was expecting when I was thinking about like a Reinhardt replacement.
The other thing that came to mind as well is that with the changes to Bastion, where he completely shreds through shields, it kind of seemed like Blizzard had realized that this Reinhardt v Reinhardt thing is the main way that people get advantage in fights. If you're playing Reinhardt v Reinhardt, you're going for the shield advantage in terms of the health of the shield. You're using that to either broach a choke point or knock people back and gain positional advantage. And so they seem to be adding in little things to destroy that kind of shield v shield aspect, and in an attempt, I think, they think it'll speed up the game. But the more you remove that shield aspect from the game, if you're still playing with slow heroes, you're just going to eat a butt ton of damage every time you come in through a choke point. So that's why you need that shields or some attempt to absorb damage as you come in through a choke, because otherwise your positioning and your movement is so obviously predictable that you just eat all the damage as you come through. So what I think they need to do is just add more shielding abilities to the game rather than removing the strength of the shields, which is the route that they seem to be going down at the moment.
I don't know if you've seen the latest PTR patch notes, but they've been kind of, it feels like they're over buffing Dive in an attempt to kind of displace Reinhardt. If you've seen like the new Zenyatta change, basically he put his Discord orb behind shields, which is, I think that's pretty ridiculous. Like you have the ability to basically get up in his face now and destroy him. You can't really do anything about it. He has no counterplay. And they've also buffed I think it was Winston. So now his his shield has a much lower cooldown. So like obviously directly ties into the whole shield.
Yeah. So what I think is interesting about that situation as well is that dive comp is already the most powerful composition in the game if you play it well. And so with the changes to Anna, the way that she is less powerful now in the PTR, and the positive changes to Zenyatta and Winston, what I think you're going to immediately see is that the dive comp is one of the only viable compositions because it's so good that even the teams that aren't as coordinated with it are going to be able to kill the others. So I would like to see them give more tools to the slower paced game style so that you can run that as an alternative to the dive comp. Because at the moment, if you've got a good dive and you've got like some ways to tweak it so that you've got some hit scan DPS alongside, like you can move the tracer off to a different hit scan to counter different things, or you can add like a utility hero, like you add a Mei on defense or like a Roadhog or something like that, then you've got all the tools you need to be able to take down anybody else, because you just pick off their support, so you pick off the single pivotal thing that the enemy comp rotates around, and there's no counterplay because supports can't hide within tanks. It's not like you can like get inside a Reinhardt or something and use his health pool. It doesn't matter that everybody on the team has a huge health. Yeah. Like what's the guy in Dota 2 where you just like you leap inside someone? It's life stealer, right? It's like his ultimate. You just get inside someone, like they're waddling along, and suddenly boom, there's two like guys right in front of you. So maybe that's it. Anna just crawls inside this. It's a snake hero, and it just eats up Anna, and then you can't kill her because he's just sat inside this fat snake.
But you can see the outline of her. You can see
yeah. Maybe that'd be too much for like all the Vor enthusiasts.
I'm seeing it in my head, and it's fucking amazing.
Oh my god.
I told you, genius.
True. They should hire you.
New Balance team member Sideshow. Hey, it's Sideshow from the Overwatch team. I do think my
toxic waste. Sorry.
my biggest issue with this patch is that it kind of feels like they haven't really been paying attention to what the meta looks like, right? Because right now, dive is clearly one of the top, like you were saying, one of the top compositions already. Now you're like over buffing it. Like it seems a bit unreasonable. I think. What they did do that was really nice is they're finally tuning down Anna like significantly. Like I think what you need to do is just tune down Anna and then see how that affects Zenyatta's viability instead of directly buffing Zenyatta at the same time.
We'll see. Maybe they're going for more of a Dota-esque thing where they have a larger patch every once in a while. Like every season they'll have one patch. They'll see how it runs. You have that meta, whatever it may be, for a season. And then they make some different patches because, I feel like if they keep making minute tweaks trying to get it towards like a really perfect meta, people are going to get bored of that in a while. Like it seems like the Overwatch community is the kind of community where they would get bored just running the same things constantly and just working on, fine-tuning the mechanics and the teamwork and the coordination of it all. So I definitely think there's going to be this kind of stuff coming up in Overwatch's future where they just do make tweaks, just kind of not just for the sake of it, but with that as one of the positives being that it will shake things up, freshen it.
Yeah.
They like having people experiment. They like having people have the ability to switch heroes to try and fix different problems. And I think if you find out what the best comp is, and you have to run a Roadhog, you have to run a Lucio, you have to run a Reinhardt, which is the situation for a lot of people right now. Like Lucio, Anna, Reinhardt, Roadhog is like 99% of ranked at least. Like you just have to have those things. So like they don't want that, right? They want you to be able to experiment with different things, to try different things in order to succeed. And if you find out what the best things are and you always have to play those things, then you won't be able to do that.
I think it's a reasonable assessment. Yeah.
What do I know?
Yeah, so that's Orisa. That's how we got here.
Yeah. Sorry. Is there anything else we want to talk about this week?
There's one more thing. So Sideshow recently put out an article about how Envious and Rogue are actually European teams, and he triggered a bunch of Reddit and Over.gg users.
Yeah,
Maybe explain yourself, Sideshow.
Mass outcry. It was, well, I mean, you can read the article over on Over.gg if you want to hear my full thoughts on it, but essentially it was just talking about the idea of attaching nationalities to a thing. It's a very esports thing to give like a team or a player a flag, and people don't fall into like clear boundaries of where they're from. Like I use the example of Forsaken within the article. He's like ethnically Russian, has always been brought up in Latvia, and moves to Scotland and now plays from there because that's where he's studying. Like, what flag do you give that guy? Everyone always gives him a Latvian flag because that's where he's lived all his life, or most of his life. But he doesn't fall into a flag, and a lot of teams don't fall into flags. Like Cloud9 don't fall into a flag. They've got 2 Canadians, 2 guys from the US, 2 Swedes, and a Korean coach.
They fall under the Cloud9 flag.
Yeah, the Cloud9 flag. I mean, so the only purpose of a flag is to attach some extra storyline or some extra useful piece of information to that team. And in most cases, the useful piece of information is what the culture of those players are, how they interact with other people, what language they speak, what other players they would want to draft onto their team. So the example of Rogue, they're a French team, they speak French, they just kicked a player who couldn't speak French and wasn't French. If they want to draft future players, they're going to be French. They culturally act as if they're French, you know, they have very passionate views about things, they're gonna, I don't know, talk smack at Hafikal on Twitter like they did recently. So this is the kind of stuff that attaching a flag to Rogue, like that's why the French flag makes sense. And the North American flag, all it tells you is that they have the ping of a North American team when they happen to be playing in online tournaments every once in a while. And like, it's a no-brainer in my opinion. But it's all about the storyline. So that's kind of what I went into. A lot of people disagree.
I will say that one of the I think one of the stupidest arguments against your article was that sports does it this way, so this is the way we should do it. Whereas, yeah, I mean, like, what kind of fucking logic is that? Like, oh, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse.
I already did.
All right, we're good. Well, essentially, like, I don't know, why would sports be a more accurate comparison than, say, like CS:GO, where these teams are like identified by their nationality? Like we see. Astralis is always referenced as like the Danes because that's culturally. I mean, they're all from Denmark, and like that's how they culturally identify it.
Might be a bad example though, because the org happens to be Danish as well.
Okay. Okay. We'll go with like
SK.
I think, yeah, SK. There we go. Like a team like they're all Brazilian.
German
right?
organization.
Yeah, exactly. But they're identified as like Brazilians because culturally that's where they're all from. They're all like fiery guys. Talk a lot of trash, like just very good players. And I mean, I think it's silly to use the sports example. Is all I mean.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Like a lot of people are saying this is like how you should operate if you want to push esports towards being sports, but that doesn't make sense. Like we are different. You know, this is esports. It's different. It's not sports. It doesn't make sense to bring in things that don't make sense within the context of esports. And so to use the example of SK within CSGO, the large majority of their fans are Brazilian fans. They're not North American fans. They're not German fans like the organization is. They're not fans of SK, the organization. They're fans of SK, the players. Fallen, the player. And Phelps, FNX.
Funnily enough, known as some of the worst fans within esports.
Possibly. But but for the Overwatch League, if for example, Misfits move over to Miami. They're a Swedish team, but they play from Miami. If at some point the Overwatch League has become so ingrained within Overwatch that their fan base is majority from Miami rather than Sweden, and the fans are more fans of Miami Misfits, the org, than they are of Misfits, the players. If, for example, the players left and they drafted in a new North American team, and the players and the fans still stayed attached to Miami Misfits, at that point it makes sense to call them a North American team, despite what the roster is, because at that point the attitude of the community and the attitude of how we perceive these teams has changed. So it doesn't make sense. Like the sports analogy could potentially work, but that's like years down the line and with a completely different attitude of how we think about teams and players. So yeah, I agree, that argument doesn't make sense.
I think that is the end goal, honestly, of the Overwatch League. Whether that happens, I have my doubts, and obviously, like, years and years down the line, that's not something that happens immediately. Like, people aren't just rooting for the Miami Misfits because they're from Florida or whatever. Like, definitely not what's going to happen, at least anytime soon. Yeah.
All right. Joining us today is Avast of the Overwatch Bird Noises team. And actually, it was really curious about the roster that you guys have. How many of those players are from TF2? How do you guys know each other? And how did you kind of get this roster started up?
All of us are from TF2. Though some of us are like less from a high level. Rob and Super, both their highest division they played in was in IM. With both of them, have played with Muma, who now plays for Gale Force as their main take on a team called Champagne and Cocaine. But then all of us played on different rosters except for Vol and Train, who played on the Bird Noises TF2 roster in Invite and also IM. Jake played for a team, I can't remember his IM teams, but he played for a team in Invite called Ding Dong Daddies with the legendary Showstopper and Alec and such. And then I played with Luca Goers / Get a Well Fan Club when we won IM and played Invite. So we all came from TF2, but none of us really knew each other besides Train and Vol. And I guess Super and Rob knew each other as well, but we were all separate entities. And they had been a roster for a while when their original support was Verbo. And they had been having results, and then when they got to the NGE playoffs, or qualifiers, I should say, that happened at PAX South, Immortals poached Verbo from them since they were still unsponsored at the time as Bird Noises. And so they were looking for a support, and they had gone through a couple people, and they didn't really like their results they were having, so they disbanded for about a week, which is why we didn't see the Bird Noises roster at NGE, because they definitely could have been playing in it if they had continued. If they had been continuous, but because of the disbanding, they weren't able to participate in some of the matches. And then by about that time, my team with the legendary White R, Mela from TF2, Pharaoh, Pi Hero, and a guy named Note, who now plays for Toronto Esports. And I guess at the time, Foe, who played for No Fast Guns, like a very old beta team. We decided to disband the roster because we weren't having the success that we were looking for, and they were looking for support, and they picked me up, and then we just gelled really, really fast, and now here we are signed with LG.
Congrats.
Yeah. All right, here's what I want to know as well, though, because for a long time, this roster looked like it was a really promising, developing team, and then it seems like recently you have honestly just shot up the rankings to the point where you're now looking like the best of the teams currently within North America, excluding Rogue, who've just come over, who played in the Alienware Monthly Melee, and excluding like Envious and Cloud9 and Fnatic, who we haven't seen because they've been over in Korea. You look like the best up there with Immortals, and you've been getting the better edge of them. So what was the turning point for your team? At what point and what happened for this team that was Hammers and is now LG Evil for you guys to become a top tier team?
Well, the core of the roster, since I wasn't always part of it, was always a top tier level team, honestly. The thing about Overwatch is that a lot of top tier teams, whether they're just forming or they've improved to that point, you don't get the same exposure to them because of the nature of tournaments and how they work. And like you essentially need a number of Gosu points to be like at this rank until you're invited to big tournaments. And I would make the argument that right now, the best teams currently residing in North America are us, Rogue, Immortals, and Selfless. And Selfless sounds like an out-of-nowhere thing, but it's because no one can see them play in big tournaments. And they're actually dominating, truly dominating the lower tier of North America right now. And like we scrim them all the time, and we have trouble beating them. Like they have a comp that works for them really well, and we've always been a top tier team, is the gist of it. And it's more of the fact that we just didn't have the exposure to be recognized. Because like in quad tank meta, I think without a doubt, we were the best at quad tank meta. Like I don't think there's anyone in the world potentially that would have absolutely bested us at quad tank. I think it was the strongest asset that we had. And we've just transitioned the skills that we had as a team in terms of coordination into this current meta. So I don't think there was ever a turning point. It was more of the exposure that really led us to being recognized. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Harsha, do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, so what happened with the move to like Luminosity? That kind of seemed out of nowhere.
It wasn't out of nowhere by any means. We had, after we started winning a lot in the upper level tournaments, we had a lot of offers. Because Hammers, we're also as a side note, we were extremely grateful and Hammers has a really great eye for teams because they just recently picked up the Chavs as well, which is a really strong team in EU. And the thing about Hammers is that since they don't have the resources to sort of just sit back and wait for teams to pop up, they're very much invested in the scene and looking for teams to pick up and use them to sort of grow their brand. And so they'd had an eye on us, and then after we left, we even told them, like, hey, you should pick up Chavs. Like, you should look at them. Because they're extremely talented. And the move to LG was we had all these offers, and we knew that even despite how grateful we were to Hammers, and they were absolutely a solid org. They paid out like 100%. Like a lot of orgs that pick up, when they pick you up, sometimes there's issues where they're not paying out, they're not giving you support, but Hammers did, and they put their support behind us. It's more of the issues. It wasn't sudden, but then we had a lot of offers, and then LG contacted us, and we were like, well, the resources that LG offers comparatively to Hammers, especially moving forward into the future of like Overwatch League, was definitely a lot more what we wanted. And we knew at the time that Hammers simply just didn't have the same resources that LG did. And so we considered our options, but I think we all came down to it is like that LG was definitely the team that we wanted to stick with. So it was sudden in the context of how fast we swapped orgs, but in terms of the context of our presence in the scene and us being viewed by organizations, it was actually something that happened over a much longer period. So
what's really interesting to me there as well, Vast, is that you talked to Hammers about picking up the Chavs as well, because you actually played them in a recent North American tournament, which I thought was really strange. Like I was looking back over the times, some of your results and some of their results, and I saw that you'd actually played each other in this Enter the Arena North American tournament. Obviously, you've got the ping advantage, but you managed to get the better of them as well. I think it was 2-0 the scoreline. And so what was that any kind of factor, like the fact that you'd actually played against them, or were you just looking at the European scene? Do you kind of follow the developing talents that were around there and that would be good acquisitions for Hammers?
I do my best to follow the European scene and follow all the scenes relatively independently. It's a little bit tougher for Korean because it's outside of my time zone, and like I really can't stay up and watch all the matches. And for like the one match a year they have in Europe, I try to watch it. And so everyone knew Chavs was up there on the Ghost rankings already, and we played them in the North American, the Rivalcade or Enter the Arena tournament, and we were impressed how well they played. Now, I mean, really, the NA ping advantage in Overwatch, in my opinion, is somewhat overstated, personally. Like, it's not like TF2, where if you had above 100 ping, projectile classes were, like, unplayable. In Overwatch, you can play projectile classes just fine with, like, 100 to 120 ping, in my opinion. It's not ideal, but it's not like you're sitting at some sort of like anchor disadvantage. And so even though it's not super like a LAN even footing, we had a really good measure of them, and we were impressed by their play. And we didn't want to leave, and we didn't leave Hammers with any hard feelings or anything like that. It was more of just a business move and just like looking for ourselves and the opportunity for what we had in the future. And we knew Hammers wanted to participate in the scene, and we knew that Chavs are a great team. So after playing them and getting the measure of them and the praise that everyone else had heaped upon them, and the fact that the European scene is like, you're either moving to an NA or you're sitting in EU and doing nothing. And we were like, well, they're a great team, and we don't want them to disband because we know what it's to be a great team and be on the verge of disbanding because you don't have support. And we wanted Hammers to invest themselves into the Chavs, because it would be a shame if a talent like that dried up simply because there's no support for them.
Now, here's another thing as well. I noticed, I think it was you, Harsha, you recently tweeted that you like the two names LG Loyal and LG Evil. So why do you like them, Harsha?
I think it's more creative than the colors, basically.
Okay.
Like red and blue, or white and blue, which is what we see in Korea pretty much.
What do you think about that, Avast?
We had a lot of different options, and when we were discussing, because when you make any sort of team name, everyone has to come together. I think the graphic designers and all their various social media people, and they have to brand and blah 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 blah. And we were given a lot of options, and we have a very particular sense of, I guess, I don't know, humor style on the LG Evil roster. And I would describe us train if you've never personally talked to Train is quite possibly the most interesting human being I've ever spoken to in my life. And he's just a little brown boy filled with hopes and dreams, and just memes, and lots of memes as well. And but it sort of fit into our style of what we wanted, like, for ourselves as a team. We actually personally we wanted different colors. We wanted like a purple and like pinkish type of color schema.
You know, like the puke green.
Yeah, well, I like the Fugue green, actually. I think it looks good. But everyone else was like, no. We want purple, and we want, like, the purple fuchsia thing. And so I was like, well, I didn't really... I mean, at the end of the day, it didn't really matter to me. So I was like, sure, whatever. But then Steve, the LG CEO, was like, no, we're going to go with this one because we want it to look more distinct, because the purple one looks pseudo-similar to, like, NRG. So they were like, no, we're going to go with this one. And I was fine with it. And I think it was a team name that fit us very well. But at the end of the day, a name is just a name. It's more about, like, your actual results. So, you know, I didn't really care. At the end of the day, I was going to be fine as long as we were winning.
What is it like to kind of have a sister team? Like, have you guys been practicing together a lot?
Well, we've practiced. I mean, even before we were signed by LG and we were still Hammers, and before that, Bird Noises, we played LG plenty. And LG, we were, especially since they had, like, the three-way European roster swap where people went to Rogue, people went to Misfits, and then LG took some of the odds and ends of that, because they wanted the more, like, singular ethnic groups on those teams. Or not ethnic, nationality groups. We've practiced them a lot when they were doing A, and we always thought they were very good, and we had a lot of respect for their players. I mean, Hedon came from a world-class team on Misfits. And Spree is really good. All of them are talented players. So we met them at PAX South as well. Well, Jake and Rob and I did when they were at the NGE finals. And we've always practiced against them a lot previously anyways. And so them being a sister team to us doesn't really change our relationship with them that much. We're just more of, you know, if they win, we're happy for them. If we win, they're happy for us. But, like, we're still just competitors and practicing against each other the same as normal, and we still have the same respect for each other regardless of whatever org that we may have. So it didn't really change our relationship with them too much. It's just now if they win, we can sort of root them on, and they can do the same for us type of thing.
That's awesome. We want to thank you so much for coming and sitting with us today and letting us pick your brain a little bit. We wish you luck and success with the signing, and we hope to see you guys get even bigger.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited for the future.
Well, I think that's it for this week, guys. We will be back next week for another 12 o'clock news.